Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creditverse. I'm Rod Griffin, Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy. I will remember my title for Experian. And this is the Creditverse, where we talk about everything in the credit universe. And today I have a great guest. December is Identity Theft Awareness Month. The holiday season is the busiest shopping of the year for most of us, but sadly, it's also a very busy season for identity thieves. And so we need to be aware of what we can do to protect ourselves and to know a little bit about what other companies and organizations are doing to protect us. So my guest today is an expert in the field of identity theft and fraud and data breach resolution, and he's a great colleague at Experian. He's going to help us understand the problem and how we can protect ourselves. I'm excited to have with me Mike Bruemmer, Vice President of Experian's Data Breach Resolution Group and Consumer Protection. He has more than 25 years of experience in the field and has been involved in resolving more than 25,000 data breach incidents, including some of the largest in the nation's history. So I will be quiet and let you talk most of the time, I think, Mike. So a learning opportunity for me. And joining us from sunny Austin, Texas, correct?
That's right. And thanks for having me, Rod. It's always great to get together, and especially for Identity Theft Awareness Month.
Yeah, and such an important topic. And I'm in Dallas, so it's a Texas conversation today. So they'll have to deal with all the y'alls and all y'alls and barbecue chat maybe later. But we'll cope with
Absolutely.
that. So let's jump right in. It is Identity Theft Awareness Month. So the first question that we always need to answer is, what is identity theft? I know it's not as simple as it sounds all the time.
It really isn't. And there is a continuum of what people think of identity theft, but I'll try to simplify it down for everybody. And it really involves three components. You have to have personal identity information. So this is anything from a credit card to a social security number to maybe a passport number for a financial account. It has to be taken. So it's taken either by physically taking it or electronically taking it. And then the third component of identity theft is it really doesn't occur until it's used. So there's lots of us that have our data that is lost, but it's never used. So it really doesn't rise to the level of identity theft. But those are the three things, and that kind of follows the 50 state regulations on what is identity theft and when you have to notify a consumer, as well as the international laws too.
Yeah, so we hear a lot about it. And I have this conversation with a lot of people that we lump a lot of things into identity theft. And you mentioned it could be a credit card. And so we think of account takeover. And I always kind of the position that it's not, as you said, it's not really identity theft. They get a card number and your information, your name maybe, and use it and maybe a password or a PIN number and use it to make charges. That's not what we generally would define as true name fraud, or the sort of the serious kind of, they've stolen your name, your address, social security number, and they're applying for credit and other services. So there's as you said, a continuum as to what it includes. So when you're working with identity theft, what do you see, or where do you kind of get involved in that process? I'm kind of off the normal questions, but I was thinking about when should we be seriously concerned about true name fraud, about true identity theft, as compared to say something like a credit card number being lost and out there in the ether somewhere. How concerned should we be, and how should we react as consumers? Should we be terrified or?
Well, it's first, let me say this, that in 2020, the average person got 5 notices of a data breach. That's up about 50% over the last 2 years. And these notices may be a letter in the mail, it may be an email, it may be just a substitute notice on a website because they don't have the contact information for you. So people are being bombarded with notices that their data has been lost or stolen and potentially misused. So there's this phenomenon we call in the industry breach fatigue, and people should not let breach fatigue overwhelm them. Anytime your information is lost, you need to just watch for the signs, how it's lost, and then depending on what it is, if you lose your credit card number, it's very easy to change the credit card number, get a new card, not a big deal. Social security number, on the other hand, almost impossible to change and can be used for other things. So it really depends on what type of information, and the more information as a group, maybe it's not only social security number, but it's your healthcare insurance card and it's your medical records. That's a real problem, because not only is it very valuable, a record on the dark web for healthcare is between $250 and $1,000, but that can be used to get medical services for someone who couldn't qualify for them, or someone that doesn't have insurance. And in particular, medical ID theft is very hard to unwind, because even Experian, who has the best fraud resolution agents on the planet, they have to actually go to each individual provider of the services to be able to prove that that wasn't you. And it might take months or even years, and it's very expensive. So I know that's an extreme case, but the short answer, Rod, is we have to pay attention even to the smallest things, because eventually they do add up.
It's that sort of build and the growth in the file that the identity thief is building that's so important. So I think that's a really good point. And you touched on something else. When I talk to people about identity theft, it's usually in the context of credit fraud.
Yes.
And I always caution people that credit fraud and identity theft aren't the same things. Credit fraud may be a symptom of identity theft.
Mm-hmm.
Things like credit freezes have a place, and they can help, but they should still be aware of, thoughtful about, concerned about the use of stolen information for other things. You touch on medical identity theft and medical fraud as a result. Are you seeing more fraud, or is the use of stolen identities for other purposes growing? Are identities getting more clever than just trying to get credit?
Yes. Synthetic identity fraud, which is taking maybe some real bits of information from the individual, but mixing in and trying different social security numbers. So you're saying Michael Bruemmer in Austin, Texas, who lives on 16th Street, but using your social, which is a valid social, but depending on the fraud systems that are used to protect us from having that misused, if they're not good, synthetic identity fraud is rampant. And I'll use the example right now. There are people right now that have 40 stolen identities, have amassed a bunch of them, and they will be using them to try to get first in line to get a vaccine. And all it is posing to someone else that they know because of their medical history is high risk, and they can prove it and have a medical record. They're going to try to jump the line, and that's a very real, pertinent case.
Yeah. Wow. See, and with everything that's going on today, we're hearing what's happening in California with the shutdown in other states. Here in Texas, we're seeing COVID increases too. So, good point. Identity thieves are industrious and thoughtful and innovative, sadly, in what they're doing. We have to stay ahead of that. And that's why we have you and your team and in our business at Experian is to help us and help consumers and business fight fraud. So I think that's something people don't know about what we do at our company. I think it's important to share. So with the holidays coming, do you see an increase typically in identity theft activity of all sorts at the holiday season?
Yes, it's follow the money, because between Thanksgiving and Christmas, you have 50% of the annual revenue for most retailers done during that period of time. With the pandemic now, in particular, you've had a huge shift in online traffic. So it only creates even a simpler environment for a hacker to intercept credit card traffic, to be able to go ahead and give you a link that offers you a smoking hot deal for that Xbox 5, to be able to offer you now. I mean, there are sites already set up offering fake vaccines off the dark web. Everybody's been inundated, and of course, we're in this unique environment. I mean, you and I have both been working from home since March. We're taking care of household stuff, trying to run errands, jumping on and off calls. So if this is an ideal situation with the holiday traffic being high, lots of diversions, the pandemic influence, the hackers are all around us. So if fraud is going up, identity theft will be going up as well.
Yeah, so we're seeing both. And in a traditional holiday season, it's not only what's happening online, but in person too. So at point of sale, I mean, we used to always talk about identity thieves, and I've talked to law enforcement agencies who have said people will leave their purse or their wallet or documents sitting in their car, and identity thieves will break into cars. It used to be they would break into your car to steal your radio. Now they want documentation for the radio. And shoulder surfers with a phone can take a picture of your credit card or a video and putting in the PIN so they can steal it in person. But now we have the growth of online shopping, online commerce. And so we have to be careful there. What are some things people should look for when especially this year with COVID, and we're all at home? Most of us aren't going out to shop. We're doing a lot more online. What should we do and look for? Are there tips that we can give to people to make sure they're making good online shopping decisions and protecting themselves?
Yes, in particular, specific to online shopping, use a credit card, not a debit card. The reason for that, a debit card will give someone access to additional accounts and be able to drain all of those accounts out, versus a credit card, which generally you will have zero liability, in worst case maybe $50 liability if it gets lost or stolen. Always shop with a reputable website. Mike's Discount Boots, I can tell you, is not a good place to shop for boots. Go to Sheplers, go to Amazon, go someplace else. And then I will also say is, don't ever underestimate that if the deal seems too good to be true, they phone you up and they tell you, hey, go ahead, let me give you your credit card. I put this down payment on. It is too good to be true. So social engineering is ripe right now, especially clicking on a link or phone calls or offers and that. And then just use a credit card if you have to, and shop with a reputable site. Those are probably the most important tips.
Yep. And I always share this story about my daughters who found a screaming deal on Coach purses a couple of years ago. And fortunately, there wasn't identity theft involved in the end, but they got the purses and they were not Coach purses. So they ended up with counterfeit items and ended up getting Coach. My daughters are very industrious, and they got Coach involved, and lawyers and all sorts of things from Coach, and got their money back. But it was same kind of issue. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So be very careful. What are some common ways? You kind of touched on this a bit, but what are some common ways identity thieves get your information today?
Well, one of the things, and again, we're just getting ready next week to announce our 2021 predictions for the data breach business. We've been doing this. This is the 8th annual predictions. And I'll use one of the predictions that I'll give you a preview on. And this is ransomware on home devices. So in the industry, we talked in 2020 during the pandemic how businesses have been hit by hackers who will not only steal the data and then throw ransomware on top and saying, hey, we've locked it up, you don't have access to your data, but they'll do it anyway to try to extract more funds. That's way up. It's up about 72% year to date. But one of our predictions is, because of everybody working from home and that the access that is even greater at home, because you may not have a good VPN, you may not have a good updated secure router, you may have someone who can sit outside your house with a pineapple device and actually intercept your traffic, or you have a weak password, a number of things from all your home devices, or maybe you're not even working on your business's laptop, you use your own laptop, there's great opportunity for that stuff to actually be compromised. But we think the ransomware trend will come and people will hold you hostage at home and seal up your data, which is easier to happen. And that's one of our predictions. So again, don't click on any links. Make sure you have updated your passwords. Make sure you've updated the devices so they have the latest firmware and you're using the latest versions of any of the software programs. And then for sure, if somebody calls you and asks for any personal information, one, don't pick it up if you have to, or hang up if they start asking.
Yeah, so you hit on two things for clarity. Explain what ransomware is.
So ransomware is the ability for a hacker to write software code that will infiltrate a system. And it could be a network or it could be one device. And it basically locks access to the user that only the hacker has. And he has a key. And it's just like a key that opens your door. This is a software key that will allow you access. And the hacker goes ahead and sends Rod Griffin a note and says, hey, Rod, I've locked up your laptop. You can't have access, but I'll give you access because I know you got your kids' photos, you get your passport information, you've got banking information, and you pay me 1 Bitcoin and we'll call it a day and I'll give you the key. That's happened to businesses in 2020 like never happened before. And it's cost businesses, let alone the insurers that cover those losses, a lot of money. We think it's going to spread to the home in 2021. Wow.
Yeah. So in a Bitcoin I saw today hit $20,000. So that's not an inexpensive payment. And so and it's not traceable or largely untraceable. Is that why they do that rather than
yes.
It's
all anonymity. It's all happening on the dark web. And most people are very surprised how big and expansive the dark web is. I always use the analogy of the iceberg. You look at the iceberg and you only see about 15% that's above water. That other 85%, just like the dark web, is unbeknownst to most folks.
And that's why we stress with our monitoring services that we monitor the dark web. It's where most of us, I don't know how to get there. I think I'm happy that I don't. And, it's something that we need to be able to monitor, and that's Experian offers that service as well through our monitoring services. So we always encourage people to check that out. If you're concerned about fraud, you can visit Experian.com. One other thing you touched on, what is a pineapple device? I'm imagining somebody sitting in my driveway with a pineapple, holding it up and picking up information. Why do you call that?
The reason they call it a pineapple device, I'm told, is because it's about the size of a pineapple. But what it does, it intercepts your wireless internet traffic between your router and your device. So I've seen actually demos, we did it at a national sales conference for Experian, where we had people in the room and you get somebody to click on what is the hotel free Wi-Fi, and it's really a spoofed device. All it does is it vacuums up all of that traffic that you're sending, and you can see inside people's devices as well in a more sophisticated version. But it's a way of literally snooping electronically within, I don't know the absolute range, but it's 25 to 50 yards. You can have someone sitting on a public Wi-Fi spoof site and clean it up. They'll sit in public parks, so they'll sit outside your home. Target of high net worth individuals in particular, again, follow the money.
Yeah, which is always sort of the mantra that we hear is, where's the money, that's where they'll be.
Exactly.
So what information specifically are identity thieves looking for? What do they need to victimize us?
Well, again, it's the follow the money back to, of all the breaches we've serviced in the last 3 years, about 38% are related to healthcare. So healthcare information is very valuable on the dark web, hence the hackers go get that information and can resell it quickly. So outside of your social, which is very hard to change and very valuable, any type of healthcare information, whether it's payment information, your insurance card in particular, or in some cases now, because again, I use the example of getting in line for the COVID vaccine, a medical history that proves you have a pre-existing condition, or in fact, spoofing that you're a healthcare worker, you can go to the front of the line for vaccines. And I think we're going to see there's lots of misinformation, supply chain interruption, and even stealing of IP for this vaccine stuff, which is another one of our 2021 predictions. But again, healthcare information is at the top of the list. Social security number. There's some specialized stuff that is even more valuable, like 4 years ago when the Office of Personnel Management, which is the US government's HR agency, they had 26 million records stolen. And what China was trying to do was get your SF-85 and 86 clearance information, which is all the background information if you've ever had a security clearance. That was all taken purportedly by China during that. And that was really very, very valuable information because it gave you the keys to all the network of people you had to have questionnaires sent to, as well as very personal information and all that. But it's about social security number, healthcare information. Credit cards, not so much, although the volume is there. So there's lots of credit cards stolen. And then a lot of username and passwords. And why username and passwords are important is not because, hey, they use them once. It's because most people reuse their passwords, which is a big no-no. Shouldn't do it. Use a password manager, because credential stuffing is what they call it. They'll take a whole batch of username and passwords, maybe from your Zappos account, and they'll try to use those at all the top banks. Why? People don't change their passwords, and it's very successful.
And when I started using a password manager several years ago, I was shocked at how many passwords for sites that I had when you start compiling that information, and how many were repeated. So it was eye-opening to realize if a person, an identity thief, gets one password, how many things they might access if you're not using unique passwords for everything. So I started doing that, and largely listening to you and my colleagues going, I think I need to do this.
Right.
So,
well, Rod, I want to point out, it is so easy now with technology and what's out there to be able to avoid that. I mentioned a password manager, which I think is important, but I'll use iCloud has a feature called Keychain. And Keychain basically is their password manager on your device. I just got a new iPhone and transferred everything over, backed it up on iCloud, and boom, I got a warning for the accounts that either had been compromised in a data breach event through iPhone, or were using duplicate passwords. Because for some of my throwaway accounts that I, to get into, let's say, a newsletter or something like that I have to sign up for, they don't pay anything, there's no monetary value, I'll use a throwaway email and the same password.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to remember, and it showed me those that I had popped up. So there's no excuse for me not changing them. I'm told right there, but of course human nature is that you're lazy and you don't do that. But there's lots of technology that will help you with that.
Yeah, and I'll just get back to it later, and we never do. What do we look for if we're concerned about identity theft? How do we know that we might be a victim?
Some of the typical things, and I made a list. First of all, if you're seeing any U.S. mail that's addressed to you from an institution that you don't recognize or don't know, I mean, sure, we get some offers for credit cards, but I'm saying if I have something from, I don't bank with Chase or have a Chase account, but something that's addressed to me it's not a credit card offer, but an official communication, there's something out of whack there. Any notices that you might get for sign-ins, like for my wife, and she's got her business, I have a backup Gmail account to be able to get in her account, but I'll get notices that somebody's trying to use her credentials through my backup and say, oh, wait a minute, hey, check with her, let me see if somebody signed in. Of course, your credit file is a great thing to monitor all the time, and any changes or any new entries into your credit file, regardless of what they are, any changes you should always scrutinize. And of course, with Experian's IdentityWorks product, you're going to get a notice if you have a identity theft protection service that your credit file's changed, so check that. Also, a notice for data showing up on the dark web. If you get a notice, and there's lots of ways to get these for free from Experian and other places, if your data is out in the dark web, it's out there, it's gone, it's being used. And then last but not least, if you click on anything on your computer, click on a link or any one of your devices, and the device starts acting up or acting strangely, generally it's had some sort of software or firmware loaded on it that's causing it to act funny, and you should go and have it professionally looked at. Because I'll give you an example. My wife, who has her own business, was operating the business out of the house, and when our kids were younger, they had access to the machine, logged on to some sites, and all of a sudden we found out with the wire transfer that was attempted for almost $30,000 that there had been key logging software that had been downloaded, and they had actually sent a note posing as my wife to her broker to actually transfer the information. If you read the note, you would have thought it was written from my wife. But because they had been following all her keystrokes and all of her emails and all that for a while, they could pose. So the hackers are just really smart people with really bad intentions.
Huh. And we always say that it's unfortunate. If they would use that intelligence for good, they could do amazing things. But
absolutely.
And if you're a Harry Potter fan, there's a line from the wand maker who says that it does amazing things, terrible things, but amazing things. And it's kind of the same way with identity. That's funny. Harry Potter fans know I read the books and have kids. I read the books. So I guess to wrap up, we knew knowing each other, we would take this half hour and it would go really fast.
Think of like that, exactly.
Here we are. I looked at the clock and went, oh my word, we're already out of time. So one last question. What do we do if we find out we're a victim of identity theft? How do we respond? How do we help restore and protect our identity? What steps should we take?
They're pretty simple. There are four things. First, most jurisdictions now, legal jurisdictions and police departments, have an identity theft website and to report it to your local jurisdiction. Second, I always encourage people to file. There's a report on the FTC, so this is the Federal Trade Commission website. One, it allows us as the industry to track cases for identity theft, which is a good thing, but it also will be asked for if you want any free fraud resolution services from a place like the Identity Theft Resource Center. They're going to ask you for that FTC report as well as the police report. Contact the credit bureau if you have identity theft protection. Just let them know, let the fraud resolution. And then, as I say, there's lots of free ways that you can get help, but what's most important is to consult a professional and make sure that one of the ways identity theft spreads so quickly is that people assume that, oh, hey, they've just taken my credit card and don't check anything else. So my advice is whenever you notice something going on in your ecosphere of personal identity information, check the entire perimeter, make sure there's nothing wrong with your financial accounts, check your credit file, see if there's any notices from the dark web, make sure your password manager is up to date, you're using passwords. It's just it's good hygiene. It's like trying to tidy your house every week. You don't just do one room and forget about the rest.
Yeah. So be thorough. Contact your vendors, watch for anything new that's coming, talk to your healthcare provider potentially, as we talked about. So make sure that you checked anywhere that your identity may be used in some way, just to be sure. So huge challenge and huge growth. When does the prediction, when do the predictions come out? Because I love to see those every year. Sometimes they're really fascinating.
Yeah, we're going live on Monday morning, and I'm going to sit. I'm actually going into the Austin office and do a satellite media tour. So we'll launch them. Then I've done a few interviews embargoed this week, but they'll be out Monday.
All right, we'll watch for those. And everybody watch for those, because it's really fascinating to see what our experts are contemplating for the future and where fraud can happen and the implications for it in many cases. And they can be tremendous, everything from an individual consumer perspective to nation state impact and all sorts of things. So I like to read those every year. Really fascinating. Mike, thank you so much for being here. And
absolutely, Rod. I enjoyed it.
And guidance. Always fun to talk, and I always learn a lot. So thank you so much. Everybody, please be safe, be well, and have a wonderful holiday season. And we'll talk to you all again very soon. Take care, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Mike.